I'd like to welcome you all to the second seminar of GLODEM's AI and CSS seminar series. As you may know, AI and CSS seminar series brings together practitioners working on AI usage in different fields as scholars specializing in computational social sciences as well. The series is actually moderated by MA-CSSL, which is an interdisciplinary research lab at Koç University, which was established with the purpose of conducting cutting-edge research on the applications of computational methods to social science questions. Today, we are really happy to host Dr. Emre Eren Korkmaz from the University of Oxford. We have a really interesting talk titled Surveillance Technologies in Migration Management and Border Security. Before I give the floor to Dr. Korkmaz, I also would like to briefly introduce him, although he doesn't really need introduction. I'm pretty sure you all are familiar with his work. Dr. Emre Eren Korkmaz is a departmental lecturer in migration and development at the ODID, where he teaches on the Master of Sciences in Migration Studies. From October 2016 to September 2018, he was a British Academy Newton International Fellow and postdoctoral researcher at ODID. He was also a junior research fellow at St. Edmund Hall and a research associate at the Center for Technology and Global Affairs at the Department of Politics and International Relations. Dr. Korkmaz was awarded his PhD at Istanbul University's International Relations PhD program in June 2016. He concluded the postgraduate certificate in teaching and learning in higher education at the University of Oxford's Center for Teaching and Learning in 2020. In recent years, he has been driven by a passion for examining the social and political impact of new digital and frontier technologies on migration. And before his current studies on new technologies and migration, his established track record in research covered two thematic areas: the place, visibility, and status of migrants in the public sphere, and the politics of industrial relations, focusing mainly on the sustainability policies of global corporations and global supply chains on the employment of refugees. Without further ado, I'll give the floor to Dr. Korkmaz. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Mary Hocam. I'm very happy to be here, and I would like to hear from you as well, your comments and questions about my presentation. So I hope it will be like a conversation between us, and we can learn from each other. So today I would like to discuss the use of new technologies in migration management and border studies. So this includes both advanced technologies and big data analysis. And this is a very hot topic in migration management and border securities, because if for states, particularly for states, but also for corporations or NGOs, if you would like to monitor, manage, stop, or manipulate migratory movements or the mobility of people, you should surveil them. These technologies give you provide you a huge opportunities for that. But all these technologies could provide very promising solutions for migrants and their integration and their rights, but they can also create concerns and challenges for migratory movements. And in today's world, where states are keen to stop and control and manipulate migratory movements and the mobility of people, particularly after the pandemic as well. So it also justifies some of these investments. We have more concerns about these surveillance technologies. So these surveillance technologies are not used to welcome or prepare migrants, but trying to stop them. And as we can see in the Aegean Sea or the British Channel, English Channel, that we can see all these pushbacks, and these could be done based on the these technologies, because you do not sit on the border and wait for someone to approach you, but by using all these technologies like drones or satellites, you can find out who is approaching to your border, and then you can just stop them before they apply for asylum. And this has many this creates many problems about human rights and migrant rights. But I can start giving some examples about how these technologies are used. So, almost all these advanced technologies can be used in the migration management and border security, including artificial intelligence, blockchain, big data analysis, all these type of technologies. We can see some examples from it. So in our current research project funded by European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, we are working with Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality. So Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality is developing blockchain-based digital identities for all Istanbul residents. So they will introduce this very soon. And all the data collected by Istanbul municipality will be stored there, and you can access to these data sets. And if you would like, you can share them with these data sets with other institutions. So in our project, we discuss how refugees and other disadvantaged communities can benefit from this, because they cannot access to financial system, they cannot get credits, they don't have credit scores. So we discuss how we can use Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality's data sets as an alternative data source to measure their credit scores and estimate their income. So this might be an example to the innovative solutions to overcome some challenges migrants and refugees face in their new countries. Another interesting story is you can read from the UNHCR's Medium blog page. There is a post on goat story. So UNHCR develops an artificial intelligence algorithm to predict migration from Somalia to Ethiopia. So what they found out that when people decide migrating and leaving their countries, they first sell their goats because it's very valuable, but it's very difficult to carry them with you. So if you follow up the prices of goat in the market, if there is a huge supply of goats, then you can predict that, okay, there is a kind of a mass migration coming towards Ethiopia. So this gives you an early warning to the authorities that there will be a mass migration. European Union's asylum organization, whose headquarters is in Malta, they also use AI technologies to predict migration and inform the member states. There are other type of AI technologies, AI algorithms for the resettlement of refugees. For example, one of them is very successfully deployed in the US. So the aim is to find out refugees, to find out places for refugees, to match cities or the town's demands with the refugees' skills, so they can find job as soon as possible when they are resettled. And as a consequence of this algorithm, there was a kind of a 40% increase in the finding or providing jobs to refugees. But we can also discuss what kind of jobs and the job quality, these kind of stuff. Because if, for example, refugee doesn't know English, then the AI algorithm may likely to offer some jobs like butchers or agricultural workers where you do not need to speak English. But this might have create some other problems as well. There are also some other type of algorithms that I would like to discuss later on, but maybe it can give you an idea at the beginning, is the AI-based lie detectors. So this is actually developed and tested on migrants, and tourists. So maybe we were tested on, some of you could be tested when you visit any EU country or a US or Canada. So the idea is you do not speak to a border agent, you speak to a kiosk, an AI algorithm, you speak to a computer, and they ask you questions about your visits. And while they are checking the information that you are giving, they also monitor your facial movements and trying to understand if you are lying or not. That's also very confusing and challenging idea, but millions of euros have been spent on developing lie detectors. Yeah, so these are some of the examples. And in this discussion, I would like to link these with surveillance capitalism. So, okay, these are surveillance technologies, but there is a new theory emerging from the business model of the Silicon Valley technology companies to use surveillance to earn more profits, which could be defined as surveillance capitalism. And I will try to link this surveillance capitalism theory with the deployment of these new technologies on borders and in migration management. But maybe we can start by defining what surveillance is. So surveillance involves affecting, managing, and directing targeted communities in a systematic, routine, and focused manner. So it should be systematic, it should have a routine, and it should have a focused manner. And surveillance aims to categorize societies and communities and to have those categories of people to act in predetermined limits. So why do you surveil people or communities? You firstly try to categorize them. So for example, if this surveillance aims to predict crime, then you categorize people who are likely to commit crime or who are not. And then you try to manipulate or guide these people in a way determined by you, by the state or by the corporation. So that's what surveillance is. Surveillance capitalism is, on the other hand, it refers to a business model describing the sources of income of Silicon Valley technology companies. So we all know that all these leaps in the machine learning and digital technologies create enormous data sets. And as a result of the comprehensive analysis of these real-time data and also the cumulative data, the future can be forecasted under normal conditions. So you can predict the future. And these technology companies like Google or Facebook, their business model is selling this such prediction to their clients. Who are their clients? The companies who give them ads to reach out their potential customers. So there is collection of all these data sets from one hand, and also able to present user-specific personalized advertising. These are the key issues. So we all receive personalized ads based on our likes or search history. So this business model promises the advertisers or clients to forecast the future. So they can show their ads to the people who are likely to buy these tools. And so this is very profitable from a marketing perspective. And in order to continue the revenues, these companies need more to-the-point forecasts. So this requires even more surveillance. And when this model is proved to be very profitable, because we all observed how these technology companies became monopolies, global monopolies, in a very short period of time, to secure this revenue system, it might be better to clear away this uncertainty in forecasts. So maybe manipulating the users might eliminate this problem. So So for this reason, we have been discussing the manipulations in the social media in the last few years. So it's not just the corporations that benefit from this surveillance capitalism business model to forecast each person's what they could buy or how they can behave, in such a way. So it's also the states and political bodies, they also recognize this power of analysis and estimation and manipulation. So we also discuss all these manipulations in the elections in the US and the UK. Maybe many of you should be aware of all these discussions, how Facebook is used, for example, or the personalized political messages are used to manipulate, or we can say manipulate or convince people to vote in a certain direction. It is no surprise that it's not only the governments or the political parties, but it's especially the security, military, and intelligence institutions identified opportunities with this. So, because their job is based on surveilling societies, but now they do not need spies following people or trying to report what happens in certain neighborhoods, for example, but collaborating with technology companies and becoming their customers to deploy these technologies to control the population is very crucial. So we all know that these military technology, military companies, military bureaucracy, security bureaucracy, intelligence organizations, they all work very closely with these technology companies. So I will come to this point later on, and we will discuss whether we can just define Google, Facebook, IBM, or Microsoft as technology providers, or should they be defined as military companies? How we should define these kind of companies based on their products and clients and profit sources. So here, the migration and border management becomes a very valuable area to understand how this business model takes the historical surveillance inventory of capitalism to an unprecedented level of advanced technology. So we can argue that military or security bureaucracy are using surveillance technologies, but if we want to prove this, we should first focus on migration and border management. There are, I will discuss two main issues related to this. The first is using the big data analysis and predicting migratory movements, and then I will move on smart borders and how these technologies deployed on borders are also militarizing the border management. So this will be the two main topics that I would like to discuss today. Big data analysis is a kind of a very attractive topic in migration research. So we are also working on a new book that will be published by Oxford University Press, hopefully in this autumn, Data Science for Migration and Mobility. And here as well, when we collected articles from almost 25 academics, most of them were data scientists, it was interesting to observe how these data analysis could be used to predict different aspects of migration management. And I'm not a data scientist, but when I was reading these articles, in some of them I was very surprised and concerned about the outcomes, because from a technical perspective, they are perfect. There is no problem, of course. From a methodological perspective, it is perfect. So all the data sets could be used, and you can estimate many issues related to migration. But from a practical perspective, it's very concerning, because when you share these data sets, when you share these analysis with states, they will not use them to respect migrant rights or to welcome them or to prepare to support them, but they will use them to stop these migratory mobilities. And in some of these articles, I was speaking with their authors, but I was saying that this is perfect, but this would kill many people if they are deployed by border agents. So that's also another issue that we might discuss from an ethical perspective, maybe. What the principle should be to share your research findings. There was another a data challenge a few years ago, data for refugees, and there the data of Turkish Telecom's 1 million refugee clients were analyzed, and there were many articles you can find easily. These articles on internet, but some of these papers couldn't be published because they provide information that some migrants are working informally in some certain construction areas, like in airports or some other bridges, for example, and it might be dangerous for them, or it might risk their jobs. Even it is informal, this is a job for them, and then it might be risky for them. So some of these papers haven't published. So as I said, all these most of these data analysis conducted by researchers, they are having these kind of good intentions. So they wanted to address states, humanitarian aid organizations, or United Nations to benefit from this analysis and to help and support migrants and refugees. But this doesn't happen in the real world. So one of our main proposals was to form interdisciplinary teams. And it's not just the data scientist problems, but there should be some migration experts on these teams to tell the potential consequences of these analysis. For example, let's give some examples from the real life. For example, the European Union signed a refugee readmission agreement with Turkey. So, and Libya and some other countries as well in the North Africa. And what they do is when they find out migrants and refugees, they send these people back to Turkey and Libya. And the US signed a similar agreement with Mexico. So when someone applies asylum, seeks asylum in US, these people are waiting the decision in Mexico. And some of these states that they have to wait are controlled by some gangs, the gang groups, which are very dangerous for them as well. And in the Libyan case, as there is no any central authority there, the so-called Libyan Coast Guard is collecting these migrants from the sea when the EU's border agency Frontex informs them. And then they put these people to some kind of slave camps in Libya. And they are all funded by the European Union. So that's also another issue. So all these new technologies or these data analysis of mobile phone data or social media data or satellite data, all the drone data helps EU institutions to find out who are approaching to their borders and inform the neighboring countries like Turkey and Libya to collect these people from the middle of the sea. And if these, for example, if these Turkish or Libyan coast guards do not act, then Italian or Greek coast guards are or the English Coast Guards are pushing these migrants back to Turkey, Libya, or France. So this is the main challenge maybe in today's world, and many, hundreds of people die in Mediterranean, hundreds of people died in the Mexican deserts. So, but these could be only done by all these surveillance technologies. I remember maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when we were meeting in migration conferences, there was a huge interest on how migrants use these new technologies, how they benefit from smartphones, their social media accounts or WhatsApp groups. And there was a kind of an optimism towards using these technologies. So, for example, there were some arguments that migrants do not need smugglers now because they can use like a navigation app to find out where they should go, translation app to translate their demands in different languages, and speak with some other migrants, and they can receive help when they want, so this, and they can also speak with their families. So, all these applications are very beneficial for them. And also in the fieldworks, or when you listen to practitioners, it's very easy to learn some examples from that. For example, when people reach to Greek shores, then before bread and water, they were asking for SIM cards, for example. Or in Bangladesh, even it was forbidden to distribute SIM cards to Rohingya refugees. Many people were imprisoned to sell these SIM cards, so because it's very vital, it's a big need. So with these SIM cards or with these mobile phones, you can speak with your families. You can find out where you should do, what you should do during your journey. But I also think that we should not romanticize how migrants use these new technologies, because there are two main concerns here. The first is these applications are not designed for vulnerable communities. And even if we are discussing that these social media platforms can be used to manipulate people, based on this surveillance business model and based on personalized ads, it can be easily used against migrants. So because they are in a very foreign environment, in a vulnerable and risky situation. And secondly, they can be detected by the state authorities. So these, based on the analysis of the smartphone data, GPS data, social media data, it's much easier for security forces to find out where these migrants are moving or what they are planning to do. And again, it's very easy to manipulate them. So this might be another research project to find out what kind of political and commercial messages irregular migrants and refugees receive in Turkey, for example. For instance, as I'm living in the UK, when I'm receiving ads about like citizenship or remittances, because the YouTube or Facebook or Twitter can detect that I'm a migrant here in the UK because I'm speaking different languages, speaking with other people. So most probably I would need, I would look for some companies who provide remittances, or who would help me to send remittances, or I would be interested in the citizenship in the new country. So it might be interesting to find out what kind of messages Afghans or Syrians receive in Turkey. But again, it's important to know that all these could be used to manipulate, because the aim of surveillance is to convince you or force you to act in a certain manner. Maybe before closing this topic on big data analysis, we also observe that there is an interest from technology companies, financial institutions, and mobile phone operators to invest in humanitarian field. You can see many business-led humanitarian initiatives to support refugees and migrants. They are also collaborating with the UN agencies to help migrants and refugees. And it's not only about the PR or social responsibility issue, but this is also very important from a data perspective. For example, a US Silicon Valley company, Palantir, is very unfamous with its products on surveillance technologies, and there is collaboration with CIA. But this Palantir also works with World Food Program to provide technology, digital infrastructure to distribute food to over 92 million people all around the world. And these 92 million people living in Yemen, Syria, different African countries, different South Asian countries, most of them do not have SIM cards, and they are living in very vulnerable situations. And they are out of the financial system, they are out of the legal systems. So we can even, we can define them as these kind of untouched communities from a data perspective. So under the name of banking to unbanked, so defining these people as unbanked, people without bank accounts, these many financial institutions, banks, or mobile phone operators and technology companies are investing in this area to bank them, to give identities to these people, to provide SIM cards to them. But it's not just about earning money from it or some, profits from these people, because these people are very poor people. But they also collect data of these, for example, 92 million people, which is also very valuable to train your algorithms. So when we discuss the role of business or these big corporations using surveillance capitalism business model, investing in migrants and refugees and collaborating with UN agencies, we should be also careful, or should be aware of these kind of issues. What happens to these data collected from these 900 millions of people? And it will provide a big advantage for these companies when they access this data. And it is even possible to discuss whether these companies are the suppliers of these or technology providers of these UN agencies, or whether these UN agencies becomes data suppliers or data collectors for these technology companies. So instead of Facebook or Palantir or Google send some people to Yemen, these UN agencies or humanitarians are going to these very difficult places and collecting data from these people, because that's very important, because you have to distribute aid. Before, it was the in-kind support. So you were bringing all these materials to the refugee camps in Africa or in Middle East, and then distributing this aid to people. But then it is said that, it is argued in the humanitarian field that instead of distributing the same package to everyone, we should give them money. Cash transfer would be much better. Then people can decide what they need and they can buy from the market. And this would help the local economy to develop. So because there is, a kind of a new emerging market there. So people go buy things that they need. So let's give them money. But of course, you cannot carry all this money in cash money to these areas, because there are so many conflicts and wars, and it should be very dangerous. Okay, let's send them mobile money. So this is another answer for it. But if you want to send the mobile money, they should have SIM cards, and then they should be identified because of the know your customer requirements. So you cannot send money. A bank cannot send money to X person in Yemen. They should know the name, surname. They should know the identity. Or a mobile mobile operator cannot give SIM card to anyone because of security reasons. They should validate the identity of the people. Then there are so many discussions on digital identity. So let's give people digital identities so they can receive SIM card and they can have a bank account and then they can spend the money they have. So all these kind of discussions in the last 4 or 5 years, dominated by the agenda imposed by these technology companies to the humanitarian field, we discuss all these collecting data or identifying people in the remote areas of the world or in the refugee camps, which is also a very difficult job. But from another perspective, why are we discussing these kind of topics? Okay, there is a crisis, there are millions of people, but we should also think about all these competition to access new markets, competition to access new millions of people and collect their data. And even these people do not shop, for example, but their data is very valuable to train your algorithm. So we should be also critical of all these social responsibility, business-led initiatives to support migrants and refugees, financial inclusion. Okay, so I would be very happy to learn from your feedback here about this topic, but maybe I can move on to the second topic here about smart borders. Then we can finish in the next 10-15 minutes. Maybe it could be okay. Yeah.
And then open the floor for Q&A.
Okay, perfect. So big data analysis is a kind of done by academics or corporations, states. But there is also another area that we should discuss is smart borders. So in today's world, when we add smart in front of any word, then it gives a kind of an innovative and technological development. So it's a kind of a progress that we should praise. So, but all these smart cities or smart borders, they basically what they do is they surveil people, and based on the surveillance of these communities, they provide some services. So it should be efficient, it should be fast, it should be reliable. But we should also discuss what could be the negative consequences of being surveilled all the time. So do I want state or my company to surveil me all the time, all my life? And who defines what efficiency is? There are so many discussions on this. So we again see this on the borders. Okay, if we want to stop irregular migration, if we want to stop people seeking asylum, we should smarten the borders. So we should deploy all these technologies on the borders. So then we can understand who approach to the border. Then of course you can, based on this data set, you can distinguish migrants that you would like to take in or you don't want. So you can the states can decide who to take and who they can select who they would like to accept to their country. And many technologies are used here, and most of them are in the pilot phase. But we can see AI algorithms, drones, facial recognition systems, biometrics, satellite images, sensors, mobile operators, and social media data analysis here as well. So in many EU countries and in the US, the border is, there's so many cameras and sensors deployed on the border, so they can detect if someone is approaching them easily. Some of these big companies are based in Israel, so they also deploy these technologies against Palestinians, and so we should also, know these. This is also very important. But an Israeli security company, Elbit, it establishes the surveillance system in Arizona, and then it can detect people from almost 8 miles away. Or another company called Anduril, it has these laser enhanced cameras. So from 2 miles, they can distinguish human activity from animal activity. So, okay, something is approaching the border, but is it an animal or is it a human? So what I could say in summary here is that both United States and European Union is hiring private companies to militarize their borders with advanced technologies. So all this public money, public funding is not used to support immigrants or resolve economic and political difficulties, local space, but they are funding these companies to develop new and deadly technologies. So in the US, since 1980, the border control and immigration budget increased by 6,000%. And in 2019, the US allocated over $220 million to border security technologies. In the EU, for the next 4 years, the EU allocated over 35 billion euros for these digital technologies. And so the US is deploying these smart borders on its Mexico border, the EU deploys in the Mediterranean, and all these data coming from drones, satellites, cameras, and sensors, and also with fake towers, so they can listen to mobile phones and check out the social media posts as well. So they can figure out who is approaching the border very, in a personal manner, even if they can listen to their conversations and read their posts. And for example, European Space Agency is using satellite images, and they are trying to predict people's mobility even within Africa, for example, in middle Central Africa, for example. So it's not just people just approaching to border, but they are trying to predict people's movement even they are in Central Africa. So that's also a kind of a very dangerous issue that we should concern about that. And all these smart border applications are produced by military companies. So now it's very difficult to distinguish military companies from technology companies. So they are working as allies, they are working together, and they are all funded by the governments. So they are using public money to develop these technologies. So the famous leading arms sellers like Lockheed Martin, Airbus, Safran, and Thales are working with companies like IBM, Amazon, Microsoft, and Accenture. They are all in the same area. So we can ask, if can tech companies such IBM, Microsoft, Amazon, Palantir, Google be described as technology providers? Because, for example, who is the largest military corporation in the US? It is Amazon. So because they provide cloud services to the US Ministry of Defense. Amazon, Microsoft, and IBM are in race with each other to provide cloud systems to many military intelligence organizations. They are also very active in development of state-of-the-art combat technologies, autonomous weapons, and robot soldiers. All these, for example, you may all watch these robots dancing in the labs, for example. It's very interesting to see robots dancing. But these robots are deployed, these robodogs are deployed in the Mexico border to catch irregular migrants. So it seems to be very enjoyable to watch these robots, but what happens when they have guns, when they are turned into soldiers? And these technology companies are working with military companies to develop these technologies. So this is also another issue that I would like to raise here. So we should be careful to define. So there are so many discussions on Huawei and its relations with the Chinese government, but we can see similar traces in the US as well. These private American companies also working very closely with the US security bureaucracy. And it's not just about collaborating, but they're also hiring people from like retired Pentagon generals. There's some personal relations as well. And it's similar in the EU level as well. So that's also very concerning, because these technology companies are supposed to be civilian companies, but now they are actively working with military corporations to develop military technologies. Maybe last I can also discuss about the role of academia as well. So most of these projects are supposed to be academic projects. For example, lie detectors. It's not introduced as a technology developed by a state or a company, but it's supposed to be an academic research project. Okay, let's develop an AI algorithm to detect lie, if asylum seekers or migrants are telling lies or not. And for example, the most famous one is the project called Avatar, Automated Virtual Agent for Truth Assessment in Real Time, applied in Canada, the United States, and European Union. So as I said, they are just checking out the information you give them, but also they are analyzing people's eye, mouth, and hand movements using sensors, biometrics, and facial recognition systems. Another famous project is called Eye Border Control, which is conducted by Manchester Metropolitan University, and it received grant from European Research Council, almost 4.5 million euros grant. And it is tested in Greece, Hungary, and Latvia. Another project is UK Border Agency's Human Provenance Pilot Project, which aims to detect the nationality of asylum seekers through a DNA and isotope analysis. So the person says, for example, the asylum seeker claims that he's from Afghanistan, and the UK Border Agency is trying to validate it with DNA analysis, which is very anti-scientific, but I don't know what I should say, but these are supposed to be pilot projects, and these are supposed to be academic research projects. So I think we should also discuss the academia here, how they are embedded to the security and military bureaucracy and technology companies, or these core military intelligence industry in general. And what happened to these people who were tested? All these algorithms are tested on them, we don't know. So that's also a very big problem. Okay, so the governments are investing vast sums of money to develop these technologies, and they can justify this by telling that, okay, they are trying to stop migratory movements, they are trying to increase the security on borders. We might also discuss the smart borders from a cybersecurity perspective. What happens when the system fails or when it is hacked? What would be your national security type of? We could ask these kind of questions, but these are justified in stopping migratory movements and distinguishing real asylum seekers with economic irregular migrants type of populist discourses. But this is a big issue, and these technology companies are selling these products to over 120 countries in the world. So when we discuss it from a surveillance capitalism perspective, we can understand how the alliance is formed between these technology and military companies and security bureaucracy. and how the public money is used by these companies to commercialize these tech-based solutions, and how the dystopic future these technologies are promising us. So it's not just about migrants. So it's not just about defending migrants' rights. Maybe you do not have to care about migrant rights, but okay, but you should think that if these pilot projects or on lie detection is successful, then we will see these lie detector algorithms everywhere in our workplaces, in our schools. So that's very dangerous, to test, and even successful implementations of these algorithms are could be very dangerous. And in this eye border control, it says that the success rate is about 75%. So the 25% failure is also a very high number. And what happens to these people if they are wrongly accused of lying, for example? What happens if they are deported, for example? There are so many questions coming out from these discussions. So it seems to be, a kind of a dystopian vision of the future of humanity when we discuss the use of new technologies in migration management and border security. And into these political conditions, both in Turkey and in the EU, stopping migration, building walls on borders, these are very hot topics. These are receiving big public support, but these technology corporations are earning so much money that might solve some of the main challenges in the economy, but they are using this to justify developing these deadly technologies. And if they test them on migrants and refugees successfully, then we will all of us, we will observe them in our daily lives, and in that time it will be very difficult to resist against them. So I can conclude here and then receive your comments and questions.
Thank you so much, Hocam. This is a fantastic talk. I myself really learned so much from the talk. So thank you very much for sparing time. Again, on behalf of GLODEM also, I would like to thank you for this really inspirational presentation. I will open the floor for questions. I noticed Sedef Hocam's raising her hand.
Sorry. Yes. First of all, I would like to thank you. It was a very insightful talk. I really enjoyed. And I was one of the participants of the D4R challenge with my team. And I was more into the ethics debate of using big data and AI technologies for social good. Afterwards, as I was more had first-hand experience with the dangers of using that data, even for the sake of migrants, you might be hurting them. Back then, there were no strict surveillance on the refugee community in Turkey, but a couple of years later on, for instance, then the deportations from the Istanbul city started to other cities, and I just realized that this kind of a surveillance system and the researchers' tools that are developed within this project could easily be put into use to surveil them more closely and utilize for the law enforcement officials' sake. But I am still puzzled with the question of where should academics position themselves on such an issue, because stepping away from that kind of a research doesn't seem to be the way to go, because there is still much potential that can be done in favor of creating some good uses of such data. For instance, we were using it to optimize the health services for those refugees that are in seasonal work in agriculture. So, but at the same time, even if I can be very careful about what I disseminate about my research findings, if I can keep the data safe, knowing that this data is already at the hands of private companies and the government officials. The methods that we come up can easily be transferred as a know-how and can pose the refugees or the other migrant groups into danger. But at the same time, I am more worried about the legitimacy that the academics put into this. Because we working on these big data and AI solutions then legitimizes the uses of this kind of technologies for social good, also normalizes the collection of such big data and use of that technologies in the daily lives of ordinary people. So that I am mostly afraid of. So I'm still puzzled. I do not have a quick answer to this question where I should position myself, but I would like to hear what you think about that and how you approach the two issue as a scholar yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a very difficult question as well, and very important question. And I think we should discuss it. Maybe we should come together to discuss these issues a lot. For this data challenge, one of my colleagues, she's a French academic, she approached me and told me that, okay, she wanted to join this challenge, but she doesn't want to inform Erdogan government about migrants. And then I told her, most probably the Turkish government is surveilling and controlling all these mobilities without informing us. They would not miss these kind of chances. I don't think that any government or intelligence association will miss these opportunities, and they should have dedicated teams on controlling mobilities, migratory movements, or political opponents. So that's one issue. So here maybe so we can provide some kind of guidelines, but none of them would have 100% solution, would provide 100% solution, because we don't know how these technologies will be used in 5 years' time. So, for example, we can say that, okay, let's use blockchain technology, which is encrypted, which is very secure. Maybe 10 years later, there will be another technology that's, that can hack blockchain technology. So it's not that easy. Secondly, we should have interdisciplinary teams. Definitely, it shouldn't be just data scientists. It shouldn't be about the methodological superiority or these kind of issues. There should be some migration scholars. So the problem is about these interdisciplinary collaborations and bridging between different disciplines. So our book is trying to contribute to solution of this problem. But I think these disciplines should speak with each other. Migration scholars don't know a lot about data science or the technologies. Data scientists don't know about what migrants live, what kind of situation they are facing. Another problem here is we still have qualitative research. I think we still need it, because we should also think about digital inequalities. So when you have these data sets of migrants, or maybe in society in general, we should understand that they represent a certain percentage of the population, which are mostly more educated, maybe male, maybe these kind of. So we should think about these issues from class, gender, age perspective. So when you analyze migrants' data, it might be only or most of it might represent like Syrian male under 45 years old, for example, maybe. So we shouldn't think that all this data analysis is helping us to understand all these problems. But as you said, these are important topics. We cannot reject them, but maybe we might ask more accountability and transparency from states and corporations. We can force them to do this. We can also raise these kind of questions to each issue. And maybe we can oppose our colleagues who are joining these kind of pilot projects to develop deadly surveillance technologies. So they should not accept, or they should not submit these kind of project proposals to detect life, for example. This is not the problem. It's not our problem. to develop an algorithm on who is lying or not. So there are so many ethical issues here as well. So that's very important, and I think a hot topic now. So I don't have a very clear answer, but we should be very careful. But maybe we should at least discuss if this helps to surveillance technologies, is surveillance capitalism, if who would benefit from these results. These are some of the questions at least we should ask, and we should learn, and we should prioritize the people, these migrants and refugees and ordinary people. We should not prioritize the government's interests or the corporations' profits. So this could be some of the principles that we might follow up, but still it's a very big problem, and it's also very difficult to reach out all these data sets. The companies also don't want to share these data sets, so it's a very challenging task. But it's not, but we shouldn't think that the data analysis is the sole solution, and it can answer all the questions. It doesn't answer,
Thank you very much, Hocam. Next, we have Müge Uğuz in line. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for the talk, and thank you for organizing this. I'm Müge. I'm a graduate student at Central European University right now. And so I have two broad questions. One is about smuggling. How do you think these technologies are effective in terms of preventing smuggling, or maybe encouraging migrants to take irregular ways more? And my second question is, as a scholar, how would you give suggestions for the new starters to study this field, which is really like interdisciplinary in terms of, as you said, data science or legal studies or sociology? So I'm having difficulties like finding new ways or like beginning ways to start to learn about this field more. Thank you in advance.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, these are also very good questions. So all these technologies are deployed in the name of preventing irregular migration and stop smuggling smugglers. But in practice, what we have seen until now is it's not the solution. So irregular migrants or asylum seekers still need smugglers in some certain areas. But for example, they might need, when they try to cross Iranian-Turkish border and Turkish-Greek border. But for example, they might not need smugglers from Iranian border to Greek border, for example, when they travel within Turkey, for example. So they can get some guidance, but meet some other smugglers. What we also know from some research findings is, as a result of these technologies like WhatsApp, Telegram groups, etc., smugglers also ally with each other, so they do not have to take you from Afghanistan to UK, but one of the smugglers take you from Afghanistan to Iran, another one takes you from Iran to Turkey, then, for example, so there is a kind of a coalition of different smugglers, so you are paying to each of them, but they are controlling some certain territories, kind of. So, and they communicate with each other through these technologies. So without these technologies, they could not do it. Another way to find out smugglers is the social media platforms. So there are so many Facebook groups that advertise about smuggling networks under travel agent issues. And there is a kind of TripAdvisor of smuggling network as well. So migrants are reading all these comments about the smuggler and find the best one that has the best way, kind of. So this is also very interesting to find out. And it's very difficult to, as I understand, follow up all these kind of forums because, they change names very frequently. So, but most of these arrangements are done on social media as well. So you can find out the best smuggler that you need from these issues, because you can read the real experiences of people who use these smugglers before. And so, for example, they are writing from France or England. That gives you an idea about that person. And also, you can use these technologies to trust each other, smugglers or migrants from different nationalities. So that's also a very interesting topic, how these people from different nationalities come together and get on a boat and trying to go to Greece, for example. That's a process. You have to trust people, you have to speak with each other, because that's a process as well. But social media is these WhatsApp groups or telephone conversations, they are all trying to find out if you really trust to that person, or if it is a kind of a police agent, so before meeting there is a kind of a process as well. So we all know that smugglers are using these technologies. It's very difficult to prove if these surveillance technologies are stopping smuggling networks, all these drones and sensors, but because every time you can find another way. So for example, now people are trying to go to from Belarus, for example. It wasn't a new way, but it wasn't used very frequently. But when you control the Turkish-Aegean border, then suddenly it becomes a new destination. So people fly to Belarus and trying to cross border to Poland. So this happens. So this doesn't stop migratory movements. There are some reasons behind these movements: wars, poverty, climate change. So without solving these problems, you cannot force people to stay in their countries. Or this is a kind of a strategy for families as well. So they do not travel all together, but they send someone from their family, a young male, for example, to work in other countries. So for instance, in today's current economic crisis, if you have a relative in Germany, and if that relative sends you a few hundred euros every month, it's good for many Turkish families as well. So many families will also force or will also decide on sending some of their family members to abroad. So we will see that there will be a continuation of this mobility. So these technologies do not and doesn't or has not stopped this, but it militarizes the border. So more militarization, more surveillance technologies. For example, these drones can be easily used in the warfare as well. So that's also another part of the story, how these militarization might trigger new conflicts. So I don't know, these are very general arguments, but from different research findings, but it doesn't necessarily stop smuggling networks. There is a different mechanism going on in these smuggling issues. This is a very interdisciplinary field, and you cannot know all these technologies, but I think it's important to understand how these technologies work and what the problems or potential problems are. And the interdisciplinary teams are very important as well. So for example, here in Oxford, there is a group called Border Criminologies. Many legal scholars, political scientists, they all come together or computer scientists, they come together to discuss these preventive technologies, or trying to predict crime before it happens, these kind of issues. So, or there is some other research groups on workplaces and employment issues. So the learning from these are very important as well. Then you can discuss this related to migration and borders. So, surveillance capitalism is a business model, but here in border studies, we can discuss it from a very different perspective. So this is such an interdisciplinary discussion on the consequences of new technologies is very important as well. So it's not just about how to use AI, how to promote AI type of issues. We should also discuss it from very different perspectives in different fields, and we can find many similarities in different parts of from different parts of the sectors or industries. I hope it is helpful, but
yeah, thank you. It's helpful. Like maybe you can also give if you think there will be must-read books or articles that we can check. That will be also nice. But thank you for your answer.
Yeah, there are many very classical books, so I don't want. It might take some time. Maybe I can send or share later. But I'm currently reading a new book called Revolutionary Mathematics, which is very interesting. How the statistics is used against for capitalism and how it can be challenged. It is just published last month from Verso. But so it is interesting. So there's some books on the use of this crime prevention is also very interesting topic. You know, how do you understand that someone will commit crime in the future and what can you do? You know, this, this is also a very interesting area. So these can be linked with the migration management and border securities as well.
Yeah, thank you a lot.
And your upcoming book, I guess, is also a must-read, which will be available, you said,
So Data Science for Migration and Mobility will be available in autumn, hopefully in October. So this is its agenda. But I'm also working on another book on surveillance technologies, which will be published from Bristol University Press, hopefully next year. So these are some
lots of things to look forward to for us too then.
Yeah, thank you.
But John, there is also a question in the chat box. I'll read that out loud so those who are watching the recording can hear. From Jaran Kaya, thank you so much for your presentation. My question is, do you think that those surveillance technologies are the result of securitization of migration or cause of it? Thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, that's also a good question. So it's definitely is a result of, yeah, so I can say it's both, but it's definitely a result of the securitization of migration management, because so when you securitize migration and borders, then you can easily justify deploying these technologies. But also from another perspective, what it takes my attention is how these military companies and technology corporations are coming together and lobby in the EU and US to deploy these technologies, how they come together with the bureaucracy, security and intelligence bureaucracy. So even in my latest article, I didn't discuss it in a very comprehensive way, but I'm planning to do it. But it's a kind of an oligarchy. It's a kind of a small group of people in the security and intelligence bureaucracy working together with military and technology companies. So the states are funding these technologies, then become their clients. And these people are then go and work in these companies. So there are some reports on this. And, and the money spent on these issues, they can be easily used to solve the main problems that people face. But these military companies and technology companies, they are very big forces and they do lobbying activities, and their counterparts in the governments in the EU and US are very willing to work with them. And it's very secretive, it's not transparent, and it's very easy to justify, who would oppose national security or border security, so it's very easy to justify them. But I think we should also ask more accountability and transparency on this type of issues. But more technology doesn't mean that it solves the issues. So for example, as you might remember my example about that. So, okay, let's not distribute in-kind support to refugees in refugee camps, because people don't need all these kind of issues. You do not have to give blanket to everyone. You don't have to give all these clothes to everyone. It's very difficult to carry them. Okay, what shall we do? Let's send them money so they can spend whatever they like, and it's good for economy. So that's a very good idea. But then, can we carry cash money to these places? No, it's very dangerous. So what shall we do? Let's digitalize the money. let's send digital money. Let's do mobile payment. So people would receive SMS when they have money, and then they can go and scan their iris or give fingerprints, with biometrics. And then they can access to their accounts, and then they can buy whatever they like. Okay, but these people don't have identities. What shall we do? Okay, let's use blockchain. So, you have this problem and you always try to solve it from a technological perspective, but these are also social and political problems. So we have some students here working on this technological solutionism as an ideology. We can solve everything with technologies. Yeah, these are great technologies, of course, but these are also very political questions as well. So we shouldn't just limit ourselves with these technologies. Then we should also discuss why we have economic crisis, why we have conflicts and wars, why we have climate change. So it's also this systemic critique is also very important as well. So we can also start these kind of questions, asking these questions. But when we just focus on these technologies, okay, well, because these are very expensive also as well. So for example, Red Cross is investing in blockchain-based digital identities to send cash. And then they're spending so much money on this. And then they do not let anyone to give informed consent, for example. It's very useless because there's no alternative. If you want, you have to give consent. So what happened to this data? What happened when Red Cross is hacked? A few months ago, it was hacked. So who's responsible for it? And then what they did they do? The IFRC staff went to farms and villages to tell people that their data is hacked in the middle of Africa, for example. So I think these are some of the interesting topics to observe, but these are not supposed to be solutions. If we do not discuss the political and economic reasons, then if we just focus on these technologies, then this is what technology companies, mobile phone operators, financial companies want from us. And then we will start talking from their own concepts as well. Instead of we are talking about like refugees or their rights, we start talking about how can we bank the unbanked population type of questions, then because they have that money and power, and then they can shape the agenda. These are the main problems, I think, in this area.
Thank you so much. We have Ayşenaz Toptaş in line. You can unmute yourself and ask.
Hi. When you were talking about the AI lie detection technology, I kind of immediately cringed because lie detection is, I guess, very problematic in the first place. And AI technology has been known to include some racial biases, I guess. I'm not fully knowledgeable on it, but especially when it comes to immigrants or border crossing, I guess race becomes even more of an issue. So I was wondering if this problem was ever addressed in these studies.
In the critics of these pilot studies, it is addressed. So it's one of the main critics of these lie detection. So there are so many studies criticizing it. It's anti-scientific. There are many cultural differences, many different issues. You cannot just blame people because their eye movements. Let's think, even if when we go to Europe for touristic reasons, for example, as a tourist, at the borders, we feel stressed. This is a kind of some very well-known jokes in Turkey as well. We are feeling stress when we are speaking with the border agent, about the purpose of our visit, these kind of issues. So this happens, and if you are an asylum seeker, it's very difficult if you don't know the language very well. This is also a very difficult issue. You cannot just blame people because of their, or you cannot just accuse people of lying because of their eye movements. And it is, it's very racial. It is very discriminatory. we can also add class and gender-based discrimination as well. So, but there are many ongoing works. So the projects that I mentioned, border control and avatar, they were concluded. So they were piloted and the projects finished. So we don't know what happened now, or we don't know what happened to people at that time. But there are also ongoing projects as well. So I think that's a very dangerous area. And they are all under academic research issues. So the governments and corporations don't take any responsibility, So, but these border technologies are also, as you said, it's just reflects the racialized discriminations as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hocam. I mean, we're approaching the end of the allocated time, but I also have a question, so I'd like to use my moderator privileges to ask one question among many others I have in mind, and that is going to be about what you already said about the United States and China having really being in close collaboration with private companies in this sphere. How do we label them? As public-private partnerships, or the engagement of the state in investing in AI for border security or military security in general? What are the differences? Can we still say there are different, divergences and convergences when you compare US, China, and the EU? And I would be really interested in hearing also about Russia, what the mode of collaboration has been there.
Yeah, so until I think during the Cold War, or maybe until the end of the Cold War, it was mainly the military organizations or military bureaucracy that developed and funded these kind of technologies. So most of the technologies we use in today's world were first founded and developed in the military field, and then they were commercialized for the public use. But in the last 10-15 years with the Silicon Valley, this Californian ideology, Silicon Valley type of issues, there were many arguments on how the technology is civilized, and it is a civilian initiative. We don't rely on the military technology now. That was seemed to be true, but now we observe such an emergence of an alliance or of these different private and public organizations. And instead of a public-private partnership, it seems to be more like an oligarchic structure. Because technology is covering all aspects of the life, all industries, all sectors. So because you use technology everywhere, you have computer, you have internet, there is no any other area that is free of these new technologies. It's like financial organizations. We all need banks. We all need these financial institutions in the market. So, maybe it might be similar to the Lenin's definition of imperialism. So he was talking about a kind of an oligarchy of financial bourgeoisie and industrial bourgeoisie, and he was defining the state's role within this. Maybe we can add these technology owners, technology providers to this oligarchy, because it covers, as I said, all aspects of the life. And so it's a bit surprising for all of us to learn that Amazon is the biggest military company in the US. So we do not think that Amazon is a military company, but it provides cloud systems, and it's very important. And if you provide cloud system to a US Minister of Defense, or if you work with CIA, of course, you cannot just act independent from the state, and it's very profitable. area. So, and we can see people are coming and going between these two areas from state to corporation. So these also are the same people. They all have these lobbying activities. They all have investments in these different areas. And so we should also think about these issues as well, how they impact on militarization in general. And militarization of border is the first step of it. And most of these technologies can be used in the warfare as well. So they can be used to manipulate populations, to intervene other countries. There are so many discussions on this cyber warfare and, you know, hybrid warfare kind of issues. So we can also benefit from these discussions as well. And China and Russia, they are all investing in a similar manner. So there is such a fear of losing the competition, you know, all these discussions on singularity, they are very, you know, live here. For example, I can see here in the UK, it is a very hot discussion. Okay, the China is will have this technological superiority, and then, you know, we will lose the race, and then it will be like what happened in the industrial revolution time. You know, it was, for example, the UK's artificial intelligence document is starting with this argument. Okay, we did the industrial revolution, we shouldn't miss this one. So if otherwise we will be dominated. In order to dominate, we should invest in these technologies, kind of. So this is discussed in the parliament as well. So I think we should not just think that these are only private companies providing some services. They are having huge money. They are global monopolies. You know, we are talking about a few companies. So most of these critics against Huawei and China, or Chinese companies, can be used against American companies as well. So, so the migration management and border security is a kind of a productive area to discuss these things. It might be more difficult to discuss if you research workplace surveillance or manipulations in the democratic institutions type of topics. It could be a bit more difficult, but in this border security area is very directly related to militarization. So that gives us some ideas and clues about how they partner with each other.
Thank you so much, Ajam. I mean, we have about 2 minutes left. So maybe we can use that time to, again, turn back to you if you have any closing remarks. Otherwise, I am going to thank you so very much again on behalf of GLODEM and MA-CSSL for this really informative talk. We all learned very much. And for our audience, if you have any questions, of course, you can feel free to email Dr. Korkmaz, but I think with that, we are going to conclude the seminar for today. We have another seminar in 2 weeks with Lina Trabucco from the University of Copenhagen. We will keep you all posted about the details. But until then, I wish you all a happy Bayram and hope to see you all very soon again.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here. So I will be very happy to receive emails from you as well. So we'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ajam. Thank you so much. I'll stop the recording now.